In 1989, Eloise Lindsay, a fresh college graduate, was at a crossroads in her life. She had just earned her degree, but didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. As an experienced backpacker, she thought a good way to get her life together would be to go on a retreat, go out into the woods, and kind of find herself. So she planned a very detailed 43.3-mile hike along the Appalachian Trail, starting in South Carolina, where the first 7 days of the hike, she would be totally on her own. Then at the 7-day mark, she would meet up with a friend at a particular rendezvous point. Her friend would give her resupplies and would be her companion for the rest of the hike. When Eloise told her parents what her plans were, they were not concerned for her safety because she was an experienced backpacker. So on November 4th, Eloise sets out to begin her journey down the Appalachian Trail. The first couple of days of her hike were great. The weather was beautiful, the scenery was amazing, and she had all this time to just kind of be by herself and think hard about what she wanted to do with her life. But on the third day, when she woke up, she had this intense sense of dread. She couldn't really place where it was coming from, but she knew something was wrong. She's kind of doing inventory of her life, like, what did I forget? Is there something that I'm just not thinking about right now? But she kind of pushes it aside mentally and thinks, okay, you know what? I'm just going to pack up my campsite here and get hiking, and I'm bound to come up with what it is that's making me feel this way. So she gets out of her tent and begins packing up her campsite. And she's looking out, kind of scanning the tree line, not because she was looking for anything, but just because she happened to be looking out. And she could have sworn that she saw a man standing, 30, 40 feet away behind a tree. And she kind of did a double take and was staring at him. It's broad daylight, it's the morning, and they're near a trail. So what is it, like, unbelievable that there might be someone near her at that very moment? But she kind of did a double take and she looked at him again, and this person was gone. And she stood there for a minute, just kind of looking in the direction of where she had seen this guy, wondering, is my mind playing tricks on me? Did I really see someone there? Why aren't they showing themselves again? If there was someone there, they clearly must have just been looking at me. Why aren't they poking their heads out again to communicate with me in some way? We're out in the middle of nowhere. We should be talking to each other. But the guy never shows himself again. And so, as she's standing there wondering what she should do, she isn't ready to yell out to this person, because there's part of her that's a little bit nervous about yelling out to some stranger in the middle of the woods. But she starts to get this really intense feeling that she's being watched, and it feels an awful lot like the sense of dread she had while she was in the tent. And she's starting to wonder, are my instincts, or is my sixth sense picking up that I'm being watched? Like there's some predator out there looking at me right now. And even though she has no way of knowing if that's actually true, she's alone in the middle of the woods, and even though she's experienced, she can't help but feel really vulnerable. And because this guy is just not showing himself again, she feels a little bit threatened. And so she begins to panic, and she starts packing up all of her stuff as quickly as she can. And as soon as she can, she takes off down the trail away from that guy she saw in the woods. As she was walking down this trail, she couldn't help but think someone was right behind her. She kept turning around to see if this person or whoever it was behind her, and no one was ever there. But this visceral feeling that she was being watched, that sense of dread she had, it just was not going away. And so, she started walking faster and faster. Before long, she was running. And she's realizing that she's in a section of the Appalachian Trail that's very remote. She's not near civilization. She's not near her next rendezvous point. And so she's thinking to herself, I need to get off this trail. I need to get to a road. I need to get away from here as soon as I possibly can. And so, her options were to continue on this trail for several miles, and it would probably take her until well into the night before she was going to reach civilization. Or she could take a shortcut because she believed there was a road that was running parallel to her trail, but it was way down the mountain. It would require leaving the trail and basically cutting through the wilderness to get down to this road, but she was pretty confident it was right down there. Because the threat of this person or thing following her was so intense for her, she decided to leave the trail. She couldn't stand the idea of having to spend another night out in the middle of the woods with this person stalking her. She walks up the trail and starts running down the mountain. It wasn't long before she started to hear audible sounds coming from what she believed to be this person that was following her. She would turn around, and there'd be no one there. And then she started to walk, trying to listen as she's walking, and she would hear footsteps far away from her, and she turned, and there'd be nobody there. But she was certain someone was following her. Someone was stalking her. And the sounds that were coming out of this person, this animal, whatever it was, they sounded like a deep male voice, but you couldn't recognize if it was a language of some kind. It just sounded more like a grunt or a yell of some kind. Her heart rate's elevated, she's panicking, and she's walking as fast as she can just through the middle of the wilderness, hoping she's walking towards this road. But after walking and running for miles into the middle of nowhere, she has not come to a road. It's now completely dark out, and she knows she's lost. So, she has to set up camp in the middle of nowhere, and she knows somewhere out in the middle of the woods is some person or something that is stalking her. And she's all alone. She has no way to contact anyone. She doesn't have a cell phone. It's 1989. So she sets up her campsite, and she gets in her tent. She zips it up, and she lays there hoping she doesn't hear any sounds. And sure enough, within minutes of being inside of that tent, she starts hearing those audible sounds coming from somewhere in the forest. And she hears what sounds like heavy footsteps walking around the perimeter of her campsite. All night long she hears this, but luckily they don't come up right to her tent. She gets up the next morning, she jumps out of her tent, packs it up, and starts running hopefully in the direction that will bring her to civilization. A couple of days later, when Eloise was supposed to meet her friend on the trail at the 7-day mark, and they were going to finish the hike together, Eloise doesn't show up. But after several hours when Eloise did not show up, her friend left the trail and contacted authorities and filed a missing person report. The police would launch this massive search for Eloise along the stretch of the Appalachian Trail where she had said she would be. For the next 14 days, hundreds of police and volunteers and helicopters are scouring this area, and there's no sign of Eloise. And so after 14 days from the time her friend filed the missing person report, the police had to turn the search off, and they say, "Look, we can't find her." 2 days after the search was terminated, so 23 days after Eloise had initially set off for her trek through the Appalachian Trail, a hunter that was out in the middle of nowhere near the Appalachian Trail discovers Eloise perched up against the trees. She's totally emaciated, she's dehydrated, she's delirious, but she's alive. At first, she was terrified of the hunter because she believed the hunter was this person that had been following her. But when she realized he was there to help, she went with him. She was brought back and brought to a hospital, and she was checked out. Besides being dehydrated and emaciated, she was okay. Eloise says she has no idea what to make of her experience, and law enforcement were baffled by it as well. Some people think Eloise had a mental break, and she effectively made this whole situation up, that she really was lost in the woods, but no one was chasing her, and she was just kind of paranoid and running around the wilderness for a couple of weeks. Other people, including park rangers that work that stretch of the Appalachian Trail, believe it's possible she could have been stalked by wild men, which are basically people that live out in the mountains that are effectively feral, that live off the land. They've been known, according to local legend, to attack park rangers, and people that live out in that area have claimed to have seen these wild men, and they kind of match the description of what she was describing. But as of right now, there's no official explanation for what happened to her other than she got lost and was found. That wraps up today's gripping tale. If you found yourself captivated, there's plenty more where that came from on my channel, featuring tons of similar true crime stories. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified about our upcoming stories. Thank you for tuning in, and I wish you a fantastic day ahead. Stay safe and keep exploring the mysteries with us.